caller's voice is frantic, barely comprehensible between gasps. The dispatcher tries to calm her down, but the reality is already sinking in. Another murder. Another member of the Griffith family dead. The address? A quiet home in Polk County, Florida. The suspect? A 17-year-old boy named Collin Griffith. The victim? His mother. And this isn't the first time Collin has been accused of murder. Just 1 year earlier, police in Oklahoma responded to a different 911 call. This time, the body was his father, Charles Griffith. He had been shot multiple times. The suspect back then? The same boy. That time, Collin claimed self-defense. His story? His father had cornered him with a knife. He had no choice. He pulled the trigger. The case was investigated. Lawyers debated, experts weighed in, and in the end, Collin walked free. No charges, no trial. But now his mother is dead, and once again, Collin is standing over a body, his hands stained with the blood of his own family. This time, he says it was an accident, that his mother attacked him, that she fell onto the knife. But witnesses tell a different story. A relative says they saw him dragging her by the hair, that she was begging him to let go. The medical examiner finds wounds that don't match his explanation. The sheriff looks at the case and makes a chilling statement. If you ask me, he's guilty of both murders. But the courtroom disagreed, because once again, Collin Griffith walked free. 2 parents dead, 2 separate cases, no convictions. Is this a tragic case of a teenager defending himself against an abusive family? Or is there something more to it? Tonight, we look at the life of Collin Griffith, the warning signs, the first killing, the second, and the question on everyone's mind. Did the system let a murderer go free? Before we get into the chilling details of this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Crime Scene for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless. Oklahoma, a state known for its wide-open plains, quiet suburbs, and small towns, where everyone seems to know each other. But in February 2023, in one of these seemingly ordinary towns, something horrifying happened inside a single-story home on a peaceful street. Inside that house lived a teenage boy named Collin Griffith. He was 15 years old, thin, unassuming. To most, he seemed quiet, reserved, a kid who kept to himself. But to those who knew him well, there was something else, something lurking beneath the surface. Some classmates called him strange. Others said he had a short temper, the kind of person you didn't want to push too far. Teachers noticed his frequent outbursts, anger that sometimes came out of nowhere. And then there was his home life. His father, Charles Griffith, was a former military veteran, a strict, authoritative figure, a man who believed in discipline. Some said he was just a tough parent. Others said he was something else entirely. Because behind closed doors, there were whispers of violence. Over the years, police had been called to the Griffith home multiple times. Reports of shouting, sounds of objects breaking. And then the calls stopped. Not because the violence stopped, but because, like so many families trapped in cycles of abuse, no one wanted to talk. But on one particular evening in February 2023, everything changed. That night, Charles Griffith lay dead on the floor of his own home. The person standing over him, his own son. Collin held the gun in his shaking hands. His father had been shot multiple times, far more than what would be expected in a split-second act of self-defense. Collin told investigators that his father had cornered him in a fit of rage, that he had pulled a knife, that Collin had no choice but to shoot, but the story didn't quite add up. Police searched the crime scene. They found Charles's body. They found the bullet casings. But where was the knife? Collin said his father had it in his hand, but when officers arrived, there was no knife near the body, no weapon in Charles Griffith's grip. That single inconsistency raised more questions than answers. If it was self-defense, why had Collin shot him multiple times? Had he fired in fear, or had he fired to make sure his father was dead? The case should have gone to trial. There should have been an investigation, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. The prosecution needed more proof to say it wasn't self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, after weeks of deliberation, Collin walked free. No conviction, no punishment. He was sent back home, not to his father's house, but to live with his mother. And that's when the story took an even darker turn. After the death of Charles Griffith, Collin didn't stay in Oklahoma. There was nothing left for him there. No father, no real support system. And with whispers spreading around town about what really happened that night, it was decided Collin would leave. His mother, Catherine Griffith, took him in. Catherine had been living in Florida for some time, trying to rebuild her life after separating from Charles. A single mother, navigating her own struggles. Raising a teenage boy who had just killed his father wasn't part of the plan, but this was her son. Collin needed a home, so she let him in. But things didn't go the way she hoped. From the moment Collin arrived, their relationship was rocky. Some said Catherine was a strict mother, that she wanted Collin to follow her rules, to do better, to change. Others said she was just as volatile as her ex-husband. Either way, it didn't take long before things got ugly. At first, it was small arguments, typical mother and son conflicts, disagreements over curfews, grades, chores. But then the fights got worse. Neighbors started hearing shouting, glass breaking, heavy thuds against the walls, and then came the police calls. Catherine called 911 multiple times, reporting that Collin was becoming out of control. She told officers he had a temper, that he didn't listen, that sometimes she feared what he might do. But there was no arrest, no real intervention. The system had already failed once before, letting Collin go free after the first killing. And now it was failing again, because behind closed doors, something was happening inside that house. Something no one could see, something no one could stop. And then, 1 year later, another call to 911 would shatter the Griffith family forever. It was March 2024 when the call came in. A woman had been stabbed. The voice on the other end of the line was frantic. 911 operator. 911, what's your emergency? Caller, my grandson just stabbed my daughter. Police rushed to the scene, a small home in Polk County, Florida. When they arrived, they found a horrific sight. Catherine Griffith lay motionless on the floor. Blood pooled around her body, a deep wound to her neck. Standing over her was Collin Griffith. His hands were covered in blood. But when officers pointed their guns and shouted commands, Collin didn't resist. He just stood there, silent, expressionless. They took him into custody immediately. At first, Collin had nothing to say, but when detectives sat him down in the interrogation room, he finally spoke. And what he said didn't make much sense. Collin's story versus the evidence. Collin told investigators that it was self-defense. According to him, his mother had been drinking that night. They got into an argument, something about his future, about rules he didn't want to follow. Then out of nowhere, she snapped. He claimed she grabbed a knife from the kitchen, rushed at him, and in the struggle, she fell onto the blade. It was an accident. At least that's what he wanted them to believe. But there was just one problem. The evidence didn't match his story. A witness, a family member who had been at the house, told investigators a completely different version of events. That person claimed they saw Catherine trying to leave the house, but Collin wouldn't let her go. They saw him grab her by the hair, dragging her back inside. Then the door slammed shut. Minutes later, Catherine was dead. And when the autopsy report came back, it revealed something chilling. The wound to Catherine's neck wasn't from a single accidental fall onto a knife. The medical examiner found multiple stab wounds. This wasn't self-defense. This was something else entirely. With the evidence stacked against him, Collin was arrested on the spot. But as detectives dug deeper, they started to wonder. Had Collin's past finally caught up with him? Had he gotten away with one murder, only to do it again? And if the justice system failed to stop him this time, would there be more victims in the future? The answers to those questions would be decided in the courtroom. The trial of Collin Griffith was one of the most shocking and controversial cases in recent history. A teenager accused of killing both of his parents, once in Oklahoma, once in Florida. Twice he claimed it was self-defense, and now a jury had to decide whether to believe him or put him away for good. This was a case that divided the public. Some saw Collin as a troubled kid, a victim of years of abuse who finally fought back. Others believed he was a cold, calculating killer who had learned how to manipulate the system. But in court, only one thing mattered: what the jury would decide. Collin's attorneys wasted no time painting him as a victim, a teenager who had been trapped in a cycle of violence since childhood. They told the jury that his father, Charles Griffith, was an abusive man, strict, controlling, and at times violent. That February night in 2023, they argued, Collin had no choice but to pull the trigger. And when his father was gone, his mother, Catherine, became just as volatile. They presented text messages, voicemails, and police reports showing that Catherine had called 911 on her son multiple times. But according to the defense, she wasn't afraid of him. It was the other way around. Collin's attorney told the jury that Catherine had a history of aggressive behavior, that she had once pointed a gun at Collin in a drunken rage, that she had threatened him, screamed at him, and made him feel like he was never safe, and that on the night of her death, he believed she was going to kill him. He did what he had to do. The state painted a very different picture of Collin Griffith. They didn't see a scared teenager. They saw a dangerous young man with a violent past, a kid who had learned how to play the system, how to manipulate the law to his advantage. They brought up the inconsistencies in his story about his father's death, how there was no real evidence that Charles Griffith ever had a knife, how Collin fired multiple shots, not just one. Then they turned to Catherine's death. They called witnesses who testified that Catherine was afraid of her son, that she had told family members that Collin was getting more aggressive, that she had wanted him out of the house, but felt trapped. And then there was the medical evidence. The stab wounds on Catherine's body, they weren't consistent with a single accidental fall onto a knife. There were multiple wounds, a clear sign of intent. And most damning of all, the witness who claimed they saw Collin dragging his mother by the hair, not defending himself, not trying to escape, but pulling her back inside the house. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned to the courtroom, the entire country was watching. The judge asked the foreperson to read the verdict. Silence filled the room. And then, the words that sent shockwaves through the legal system: not guilty. Collin Griffith was acquitted on all charges. The jury simply couldn't disprove his self-defense claim beyond a reasonable doubt. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped in disbelief. Others nodded in quiet agreement. Outside, the media swarmed. News outlets blasted the headline across the country: twice accused, twice acquitted. And in the days that followed, one question remained: was justice truly served? Or had the system just let a killer walk free? The case of Collin Griffith didn't end in the courtroom. In fact, some would argue it was just the beginning, because as soon as the verdict was read, the real trial began. This time, in the court of public opinion. People took to social media, news outlets, and online forums to argue, to dissect every piece of evidence, to try and answer one burning question: who is Collin Griffith? A victim, a killer, or something in between? Let's break down the theories. Theory 1. Collin was a victim of domestic abuse. To those who supported Collin, the story was painfully clear. He was raised in a household filled with violence. His father, Charles Griffith, was a military veteran, a strict authoritarian figure with a documented history of domestic abuse. 911 calls, police reports, witness testimony. All signs pointed to a household where violence was not just common, it was expected. And then there was his mother, Catherine. She too had a history of anger issues. Neighbors heard the screaming matches. Friends saw the bruises on both of them. And when Catherine called the police on Collin multiple times, it wasn't because she was afraid of him. According to his supporters, she was lashing out, trying to control him the way she always had. So when Collin shot his father, it wasn't murder, it was survival. And when his mother died, the same thing. Collin's defenders say the justice system got it right. He had suffered enough, and now he deserved a second chance. But not everyone agreed. Theory 2, Collin was a manipulative killer. To some, Collin Griffith wasn't a victim. He was a murderer who knew exactly how to play the system. They pointed to the pattern. The first killing, his father, shot multiple times. The second killing, his mother stabbed in the neck. And yet, both times he claimed self-defense. Both times there were inconsistencies in his story. Both times he walked free. Some argued that Collin wasn't just reacting to violence, he was escalating it. That he learned from his father's death that the justice system could be manipulated. That once he got away with one killing, he knew he could do it again. And that this wasn't about survival, it was about control. Collin didn't just kill his mother, they said. He planned it. Theory 3, the justice system failed. But perhaps the most chilling theory wasn't about whether Collin was a victim or a killer. It was about what came next. Because while Collin was found not guilty, many believed he was still dangerous. Even the local sheriff, who had investigated the case, publicly stated, "I think he did it, but thinking it and proving it are two different things." That was the problem. The evidence wasn't enough. The jury had to follow the law, and now Collin was walking free, which led to the final, most terrifying question. Would there be another victim? Collin Griffith is a free man, but will he stay out of trouble? Or is he a ticking time bomb waiting to strike again? Some people believe this case isn't over, that it's only a matter of time before Collin is back in the headlines. What do you think? Now, I turn the question to you. Was Collin Griffith a victim of unimaginable abuse, forced to defend himself against two violent parents? Or was he a manipulative killer, using self-defense as a convenient excuse? Twice? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, will he do it again? Because history has a way of repeating itself. And when someone gets away with murder once, maybe even twice, what's stopping them from doing it a third time? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe in Collin's innocence? Or do you think justice wasn't truly served? Drop your opinions in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you found this case as disturbing as I did, make sure to check out this next case. One that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice. And of course, if you love true crime, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Because as long as cases like this exist, we'll be here to tell their stories. See you in the next one.